So if you want to share some things that have worked really well and you think would be beneficial to us, I encourage you to share.
Thanks, Kaylee. Yeah, I've been working remote for over 5 years now just because our JA office is headquartered in St. Paul, so I have to be remote. So this really isn't anything new for me. Another thing besides list making, I schedule out time on my Outlook calendar just so people won't bother me. So even if I'm not in a meeting, I'll schedule out my time that I'm working on a grant or I'm working on a project if it's high priority, just so that people know I'm busy and I'm not readily available. And that's worked really well for me too. And then just turning off anything you can, turn off your email, turn off your phone if you don't want to be bothered. It really helps get the work done and you don't have those added distractions that you might get from working at home.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie. I wanted to share a couple things I had noted, and it looks like you guys are kind of talking back and forth in the chat, but I liked how they talked about multitasking in the article and then also in that webinar. And I don't know if anybody remembers when Brian Hart had come in to do a meeting with us and talking about multitasking and how it just depletes your actual level of productivity. And it also makes you more emotionally and mentally just like drained, because your brain is constantly flipping back, so you feel more exhausted by the end of the day. So then what I thought of that led to that was breaking down that priority. So if we have 7 priorities, is there somebody on our team or is there a coworker or colleague that we can pass part of that priority off? I'd love to hear from somebody who has a team where they do that on a daily basis or weekly basis. So if anybody wants to jump in.
I'll jump in here. So we have a very team setup as our infrastructure. So we have an agent, which would be myself, an account executive, and an account specialist. And each of us have our very specific roles that all work together. And based on what we're talking about, the account executive is either going to work on safety programs or cost containment strategies. And then the account specialist is a lot of your internal paperwork. But typically all that funnels through me as the agent, as the main point of contact. So I love all the comments on task. I do that every morning. I sit down and write it on my task, but then I do what Kaylee was saying, where it's like, okay, this is what I need to send to the account executive. This is what I need to send to the account specialist. And then I make sure I put notes down to, at the end of the day, making sure that we contacted and talked about it as far as, is there next steps? Was it taken care of? Do I need to reach back out to the client and follow up? So we're internally built that way, but it works very well for us.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Thomas. Anybody else out there who has a different perspective where they can't necessarily hand everything off and they have their own list of things that they need to do? Nobody?
I don't know. We don't necessarily, I mean, we're kind of a mix of the both. I suppose there are definitely some things that each of us individually have to get done, but I think we're doing a good job right now of adjusting whose jobs are what, because basically what we spend most of our time on is putting on events, and we can't do that in the way that we're used to at the moment. And then like some people, maybe especially for our administrative people, a lot of their stuff is in the office, and so while they're at home, we still want to keep everyone pretty busy and engaged. So we've started to do our staff meetings broken up. So we'll do like half of the meeting on Monday mornings, and then we do the rest of our meeting on Thursday mornings. So then that gives everybody 2 chances in the week to check in and get some stuff done, and then bring extra questions before the end of the week. Another thing that we've done is just started to involve more people in communication earlier on, maybe in planning. So for example, if normally Gail might prep a event and then let me know 3 weeks before the event happens, like everything that's going on, because now at this point I'm brought in as the communications person. that doesn't necessarily work so smoothly when you're not bouncing in and out of each other's offices. So like now she'll bring me in at the very, very start of the planning. So I'm involved with the entire thing and understand what's going on. And that also helps because we are all spread out. And so if any one of us gets a call, we all have some sort of idea of what's going on. So that helps, because what I'm struggling with is feeling like I'm like losing details or things might be slipping through the cracks if I'm not sure that somebody's got it covered. So, and then the one other thing I wanted to mention is we've always done this, but in our Monday staff meetings, we have a what is one goal of something that you're going to have done by Friday for our members, and then what is the absolute one most important thing that you have to get done this entire week that has to be done before you leave for Friday. So we've always done those, and then we recap the following Monday. But I think that that's a good thing that they've implemented, because I have a problem with trying to make like 10 things a priority at once.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mixed messaging when it comes to tasks and work-life balance and organization and prioritization. So this webinar isn't necessarily like the only way to do it, but maybe incorporating other things and how to set criteria for your priorities, so that when it does come to like a work project, you know, what is that criteria where this work project is no longer my number one focus? What is going to set that off track, and I'm going to have to shift focus to something else? Because I think it is important having that work-life balance. And I know that lady was talking about different buckets. And when you're working from home, those buckets might look the same because you're at home, you're doing laundry, you're doing house projects, you got your kids. So it's really hard to set those lines. But I think if we all just incorporate one thing from this webinar to have a better process, we'll be better for it. I also wrote that down. That one stuck out to me. And then also the journaling of tasks. I think sometimes what happens is we write down tasks, but we don't start grouping them. So then we get overwhelmed by a number of tasks that we have. It looks like a long list, but if you start grouping them together, you can achieve those tasks at the same time and cross off a bunch of them versus skipping back and forth on your list. Nikki, cleaner notes. I like it. Sometimes we're in such a hurry to write. I want to encourage other people to, if you want to talk, please talk. So just raise your hand and go ahead and share. Go ahead, Jerome.
Sweet. That felt like school for a second. And oof. All right. So I liked the idea of grouping the list together based on things that you would normally do, just because it kind of lends itself to the where am I trying to go, or where do I see myself, and what are my goals. So I kind of do that now just because with working at the studio and at United Way, I have priorities for both of those. So I tend to try and prioritize my list based on those things. So for my breaks, I like to do my Miss Melinda's activities. So choreographing, maybe take a class, something to refresh myself so that I can go back into the United Way work. And that way those breaks actually lend themselves to my other classes. So at least something else is getting done. And I enjoy it. So it's pretty cool.
I'd love to hear from somebody who hasn't shared yet. Anyone? Can I call out somebody to share? Nicole?
Something here.
Go away. So that kind of got me thinking with that webinar, you know, at being in sales and as a realtor, you have tasks that you have to do. And of course, you know, that changes for me, maybe an hour by hour basis or halfway through the day. So I'm constantly redoing my to-do list, but I also have to have intentional tasks. So for instance, each day I'm going to watch something that has to do with real estate or something similar, or I'm going to read an article, or I'm going to gain more knowledge on different neighborhoods in the area. So I think, I have several to-do lists, but that webinar just kind of reminds me to focus more on the long-term goal of gaining that knowledge rather than just the daily tasks, if that makes sense.
Zach, did you want to share something too?
Yeah, I was just going to say kind of what I wrote down there in the group chat. I've always been told making lists or journaling are very important, but they can get long and very daunting. So kind of symbolizing those and kind of attacking them one by one is very important, especially right now. Like we've been talking about the whole time with all the distractions at home. It's easy for me to start cleaning the kitchen, even though I haven't done that at all. It's easy for me to have the idea of doing something different. So just trying to focus on the task at hand is very important. So.
Awesome, thanks. All right, I'm gonna do one last call for anybody that wants to share. And then after that, I'm gonna ask you guys, you can take off as we're getting closer to 1 o'clock. But before you leave, throw that rating of the meeting in that chat. If you don't want everyone to see it, you can send it privately to myself, to Kelty, who is under St. Cloud Chamber, or to Zach. And then us three are gonna stay on this meeting and kind of discuss everything for next month. So if there's anybody else that wants to share some input, I'd love to hear it.
Well, let's have Jeff and then Allison go because they both got their hands raised. And then that can wrap up those comments.
So the to-do list is something that, being that I have to do most of the things in my business, my to-do lists get huge and overwhelming and really daunting. And so a lot of times it'll put me in a paralysis. And I was reading a book, it's Sarah, I can't remember, but the book's called Get Your Shit Together. And it's a really good book. She also has another book that uses the F-bomb. That one's really good too. I haven't read it, but they're both supposed to be good. The to-do list, if you have a to-do list, and then what she said is take that to-do list and make a must-do list. If I didn't get these 3 things done today, my world would fall apart. And get those 3 things done, and then don't worry about the rest. And what you find is that a lot of those things on your to-do list really didn't need to get done. They didn't have to be there. And you may get to them the next day, or you may not get to them for a couple weeks, and then you can realize that maybe they weren't really important and they didn't have to be on that long to-do list. But just something that's helped me a lot. I have to revisit it once in a while because I forget, and I end up with 20 things on a list in one day to do.
Thank you, Yuppie.
So I guess my takeaway is kind of 2 different things is right now, so I'm still currently working in the office. We've been taking a lot of phone calls for the PPP, the SBA CARE Act and everything. And so I guess my one thing is I am constantly multitasking. I'm jumping back and forth from taking a phone call with people's questions, going to opening someone's an account to rate calls. So I'm kind of all over the place. But the other thing too is prioritizing. So we do have quite a few people working from home, and I think they're realizing as they're working from home how much they rely on just a printer that's here, because technically some of the stuff they can't print at home. So they'll always message us being like, hey, can you print off this check and mail it off to this company? So it's just kind of doing a lot of back and forth for me. So definitely a lot of lists that I've been writing down, or I have stacks of bits of scrap paper for things that I have to do, or emails to send to someone being like, hey, so-and-so called, can you give them a call? So it's definitely working here. It's a lot of multitasking.
Thank you, Allison.